This episode of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl podcast is driven by Cornerstone Gun Dog Academy. CGA is the world's most comprehensive online gun dog training resource. They've got over 160 instructional videos, including everything that you need to take a 7-week-old puppy to a finished gun dog. Visit cornerstonegundogacademy.com to sign up for their free preview module and begin your training journey today. Cornerstone Gun Dog Academy, the world's most advanced gun dog training resource on the web. You are listening to the HP Outdoors Waterfowl podcast, episode 132. This week on the show, we're checking in from the 2019 NRA Annual Meetings and Convention, where we stopped by the Beretta booth to celebrate the final conclusion of the Beretta Torture Tour and the A400 Xtreme Plus. All right, welcome to the 132nd episode of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Palm, and we're your on-demand audio source for all things waterfowl and waterfowl hunting. You can check us out at hpoutdoors.com. You can find us across all of the quality podcast databases and catchers out there, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, all the good ones. You can find our show. You can also catch us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you're a Facebook user, head over to our listeners group and join a bunch of like-minded hunters talking waterfowl and waterfowl hunting. And you can also chat with my co-host Dan Harushka in that forum, who is unfortunately not with me this week, given that we were on the road and out in Indianapolis for the NRA Annual Meetings and Convention. Before we get too much further down the road this week, I do want to take just a second to thank Gunner Kennels. They're engineered for your dog, designed for travel, and built for your peace of mind. The G1 kennel has set a new industry standard and put Gunner Kennels in a category all its own. Gunner was started to protect your pet, and it continues to be at the center of everything that they do. Gunner was dedicated to building the best and safest pet travel crate on the market because man's best friend deserves man's best kennel. Check out their G1 series of kennels and accessories at gunnerkennels.com. Also, thank you to Eukanuba. We're out in the field. How you've prepared determines how you'll perform. With balanced fat and protein to support peak condition, Eukanuba premium dog food enhances strength, energy, and endurance. So when the pavement ends and the truck doors swing open, you and your dogs are ready for anything. Strong, focused, ready for anything. That's a Eukanuba dog. And also thank you to Big Kansas Outdoors. They're the premier waterfowl and upland destination in central Kansas. Big Kansas puts you on a phenomenal waterfowl hunt in the morning and followed by a great afternoon pheasant and quail hunting in the afternoon. Check them out on Facebook and Instagram. Big Kansas Outdoors is an experience of a lifetime. Also, if you're into discounts, you can head over to the HP Outdoors website. Click on the discounts tab and you can see how you can save some cash with a couple companies that have been so kind to offer that to the listeners of our show. So head over there and make sure you take advantage of that. And also we encourage you to support the sponsors of our show. Anytime you have an opportunity, obviously they help us do what we do. So we certainly appreciate them. All right. So this week I went out to Indianapolis and met up with the Beretta team for the conclusion of the Beretta A400 Xtreme Plus Torture Tour, which was hosted at the 2019 NRA Annual Meetings and Convention. And what's neat about this deal is the Torture Tour essentially kicked off last year at the NRA show and concluded at this year's NRA show. So they had a lot of great videos, photos, stories that were collected over the year through the hunting destinations. And we've talked quite a bit about the Maryland experience on our show already. And this week, I'm joined by Eric Stern, who's a product manager with Beretta, and also Diane Sorantino, who is a Beretta team captain. And both of them were able to go on one of the stops. So they share their experience from their stop of the Torture Tour with us, as well as, you know, Eric and Diane were both intimately involved in the design of the gun and where some of the features come in. And why this is important is because this particular gun has a lot of features that come sort of crossover from the competition side of shooting into the hunting side of hunting, which is kind of unique and really cool to hear them talk about that. And we also talk about some things that, regardless of the firearm that you shoot, we talk about, constriction and chokes and things like that, and all things that are going to be valuable for anybody, regardless of what kind of firearm you choose. So This was a great conversation. It was an awesome opportunity to go out and spend some time at a convention around a bunch of like-minded outdoorsmen and Second Amendment enthusiasts, and just spend some time chatting with people about the gun and hunting and all that kind of stuff. So I don't want to beat around any longer. I'll go ahead and roll right into this interview with Eric and Diane out at the 2019 NRA annual meetings. All right, a little bit different venue for us this week on the show. We're here at the 2019 NRA annual meetings and convention. We're here celebrating the end of the Beretta A400 Xtreme Torture Tour. And I've got two special guests joining me this week. We've got Eric Stern, product manager, and Diane Sorantini, Beretta team captain. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Josh.
Yeah, we're excited. I appreciate you guys making some time. I know shows like this are incredibly busy for you guys, and time is a premium, so we certainly appreciate you spending some of that with us today. But I wanted to, before we roll into the gun and the hunts and the reasons why we're here this weekend, I wanted to just give you guys an opportunity to share a little bit about yourselves and tell our listener base who you are and sort of a little bit about your background. So, Eric, why don't you go ahead and start?
Me?
Yeah.
Me in the hot seat. I see. Okay. My name is Eric Stern. I have been with Beretta since 2011, and before that, I was working in the industry at small retail locations for the most part. Apprenticed to a gunsmith for a number of years, but once I got into Beretta, I kind of hit I like to say I hit the jackpot. I kind of got right into my dream job, working with a company. It's the oldest firearms company in the world, and it's been amazing since 2011. I really love it. But I started out in service there, learned a lot about a lot of stuff. I have a lot of really useless knowledge kicking around, but you pick up stuff hanging out with Randall and all those boys in service. But I went from there. I became associate product manager for Pro Shop. So in Beretta parlance, Pro Shop is everything that goes on a gun or in a gun. So choke tubes, butt stocks, butt pads, cheek protectors, beads if we're sticking to shotguns, or if we're talking to pistols, we're going to say magazines or parts or anything like that. And I did that for a number of years, and then obviously they liked what I was doing, so they just put more and more stuff on me. I started doing the pistol stuff, and I manage our pistol platforms. And then I manage the carbine platforms, so that's our CX4s and the ARX series. And last but not least, my absolute favorite side, because, pistols and shotguns are equal in my eyes in terms of how much I love them. But shotguns, it's just something about the gospel of the gauge. I love to spread it. So I've also been tasked with managing our semi-automatic shotgun platforms. We have another PM who manages our over-unders. But when it comes to all of our semi-autos, that's me. So that's been... Gee whiz, Diane. When did Chris live? It was like 2 years ago, wasn't it?
About 2 years.
Yeah, so It's been about 2 years I've been doing that. Time flies. I really have been enjoying it quite a bit. I got to say, I do everything from tactical shotguns with our 1301. You remember that Athlon video to waterfowling with the A400 Xtreme Plus, to sporting clays, trap, skeet. And I remember one weekend I went from a tactical event, came back to the office, dropped off the 1301s and the pistols, grabbed a bunch of over-unders with Jonesy and A300 Sportings and 400 XLs. We went up to PG County and did an event up at the clay fields. Yeah. And then we were right back, and we had an A400 Xtreme Plus event, and we had to fly out with that. It was all within the course of a few days. It was crazy, but, got to spread the gospel of the gauge. So for me, I'm all bred all the time. You name it, I've shot it.
Well, and it's funny, we're an audio show, obviously, but I met you for the first time at the hotel last night. And as soon as I saw you walk in, I knew who you were, because 5 years or so ago when the A300 came out, I bought one. And the first thing I did is I went to YouTube to watch a video on how you disassemble it and how you clean it. Yep, and you're the guy that had the video. So exactly. Although I'd never met, I'd certainly seen you a lot and listened to you a lot. So those videos are definitely informative and helpful for guys, that are getting firearms. So we appreciate
all the stuff that you guys handle on your plates and that you put out there for the consumer.
I did those videos, I think 2011,
Yeah.
2012, so that's going back a ways.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's, it was when I was in service, but they're still kicking around. They're still relevant. So.
No doubt.
Well, exactly. They're very relevant. And to this day, I'll direct people to watch some of those to just get a better understanding. I'm like, YouTube it. Watch Eric's video.
Well, it's funny because I hunted snow geese in Arkansas this year, and I took my A400 with me, and it was the first time I ever had a reason to pull the plug.
Yep.
So I had no idea how to do it. So I was like, back to Eric's video, and I've watched, how to get the plug out. So definitely still relevant. All right, Diane, how about you? Talk about a little bit about your background for us.
Well, my name's Diane Sorantino. I come from the competition end. My games that I shoot are sporting clays and FETAS. I've been with Beretta quite a while. I'm on the shooting team. I'm actually the captain of the shooting team. And I've been around for about 20 years. So
we're lucky to have her.
Coming from the competition side and, as established in as you are, I have no doubts that you'd be able to handle yourself just fine in the duck blind with us shooting live birds instead of clay birds.
It was, it's just awesome. Well, I love to hunt too, so that's no secret. But pretty much anything with a gun, or especially a shotgun, I feel right at home.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm glad to have both of you here because it really does give us a unique insight to some of the thought process and sort of the evolution of the A400 and the features that were built into it. But before we get into that, both of you had an opportunity to take be involved with the tour and take in a couple of the different stops. So, I've talked about the Maryland stop quite a bit already on the show, but why don't you share with us the stops that you guys were involved with and just a little bit about kind of that hunt and some of the challenges you may have faced there, just some of the things that you'll take away as we kind of wrap up this year-long event here this weekend.
I'm going to let you first on this one.
Okay. I was involved directly, hands-on with the stop in Utah on the Great Salt Lake.
Yeah.
It was just an incredible experience. We assembled an incredible group of hunters and to go out and take that Xtreme Plus to the test. And, for some of our listeners may have experienced the Great Salt Lake, but for me, it was my first time. So overwhelmed. I couldn't believe I stood in the middle of a lake, okay, as far as you could see, and the water was only to my ankles.
Right.
Yep. Something that had been explained to me, but till I experienced it, it was great. So we had a really good time. Now, these guns were just put to the test. The weather was just
as I
extremely cold.
Your stop particular had the worst weather.
We had snow.
Yeah.
We had sleet. We had rain. So we ran the gamut of weather, and the guns were out through it all. For 2 days of just solid shooting, we had zero malfunctions. The hunters that we assembled were very happy with the performance of the gun. The feedback was all very, very positive.
Yeah.
And luckily, I got a chance to jump in and shoot a few myself.
Send a few, yeah. How about you, Eric? What stop were you on there?
So I got lucky. Maybe lucky's not the right word. I was on the very first stop.
Okay.
And it was up in Alberta. Lucky is the right word now that I think about it.
That sounds pretty lucky to me.
That's the right word. I was up in Alberta. It was my first time hunting in Canada, which Zach Cottle, the rep for Southwest region, had told me I would love it because he's got a hunt cap up there. He told me some of the things to be looking out for. So I was up in Alberta. I had a challenge on a personal level because I'd been in Italy the week before, and I flew into to D.C. and had to immediately fly to Alberta. So my body for the entire time I was up there thought it was in Milan, time zone wise. But we didn't have nearly the level of, since I was on the first stop, it was early in the season, so we didn't have nearly the level of weather conditions that Diane's hunt had. We had snow, we had cold weather, but it was for the most part pretty clear. But it was cold, and I would say that we got a softball on the first one.
Yeah.
We got lucky for that start. But, man, we saw so many birds. I don't think I've ever seen as many birds as we saw in Alberta. I mean, the first day we were out in the middle of the field with our what, 6 shooters? I think it was 6 shooters because we had
Yes.
we had the guests, and then I was there, so I was shooting as well when there was room.
Yeah.
And
Sounds like me. I was just trying to fit in when
Yeah.
there was an opening spot.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And I got to tell you, when Rob, the guide, said, "All right, up and at 'em," I'm up and looking, and it's a solid field of birds. I've never seen so many birds in front of me in my life. It was just completely, like, the sky was just completely blacked out with birds. Ducks, geese, you name it. And it was just like, man, I was shocked. I had
Right.
so much fun. And I got to tell you, that was probably the best bird hunting experience I've ever had. And I did it on not knowing what time it was, not knowing where I was. I was just basically living on coffee. Justin and I were back and forth between Saskatchewan picking people up because they ran out of rental cars because everybody was up in Alberta hunting.
Right.
It was not ideal personal conditions. And then it was really nice to just know the gun would just work.
Yeah.
I didn't have to fiddle with any of them. They worked great. We knocked that sky clean. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
And it was nice. It was really, really nice. I want to do it again on a personal hunt, but it was, I don't know, coming off of all the product meetings in Italy where you're stuck in an office and you say, "Oh, I'm going to Italy to work." Everybody's like, "Oh, that's awesome," and you're going to go see these things. Well, we're stuck in an office.
Well, for me, you could talk about the gun until you're just your ears are tired, but to actually put it in the field and take it to the test,
That's right.
That's where it is.
That's where
That's
the
where it
rubber
is.
meets the road.
Yeah.
And to know that it's just going to work every
Right.
time you need it,
Right.
especially after all that personal stress you got with travel, or I mean, you said it was so salty, your waders are still white with salt.
Yeah.
To this day, my waders still have white on them for the salt.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's funny. That's the funny thing because being on the last stop of the tour, in my mind, I was like, what kind of condition are these guns going to be in? I mean, are they cleaning them? I knew they'd been to the Salt Lake. Like where I hunt, we hunt, I'm hunting Maryland and Virginia. That's my home turf. So it was kind of cool how the last stop was sort of like a, like home field advantage for me.
Right.
But hunting in brackish water and stuff like that, I know even that level of solidity in the water can be
Right.
tough on your gear.
Well, I won't lie, Josh. Out there, the water's so incredibly salty. The guides told me it's 7 times saltier than the ocean. Okay, so nothing really lives in that water except for some little type of brine shrimp, and that's what the ducks feed on. So when we would, at the end of the day, we'd go back to the house where we were staying, and I'd look at these guns and the incredible amount of salt on them, water. I was a little concerned.
Yeah.
Okay?
That
I'll
makes
be
sense.
honest with you.
Yeah.
But it turned out to be, it didn't phase this gun.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty amazed, you know.
Yeah, I gotta be honest too. I mean, from our experience, I think the torture was just the sheer amount of fire. We shot 5-man limits of ducks by like 8:30 on the first morning, and we were just barrels hot all.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, well, they've been through a lot. I don't know if they'd been shot like this, but we're gonna find out.
Oh, no, that was
Right.
the first night. The one I was there first night. Excuse me, it was night to me. First morning in Alberta. That was it. We limited out by 7:00 in the morning. It
Yeah.
was ridiculous.
Yeah.
First light, and then we limit out within 15 minutes. It was just I'd never seen anything like it. But during that hunt, the most torture we had was we were shooting the bejesus out of these things, and they were getting dirty and muddy, and everybody was. We had a couple guns fall when people were trying to avoid. We had a goose come right into the blind.
Oh, wow.
And it almost hit John Falk. No, it was Natalie. It almost hit Natalie, and she barely avoided getting smacked by this big old snow. But that was our level of torture. Diane, on the other hand, got hers pretty tortured.
Right. I mean, just by virtue of the weather conditions and the water. Like I say, I'm going back to the salt content in the water because these are things you would normally hear. And for a gun owner, you'd be like, "Oh, wait a minute!
Right.
I don't want to put my gun out in this."
Yeah.
I know on the competition side, you get a little rain in a competition, and everybody panics.
Right.
Everybody's trying to cover their gun,
Yeah.
do this and do that. So
Yeah.
Diane actually called me from the lake, worried about the salt, and I'm like, "No,
I did. I will admit it. I said, Eric, I'm a little concerned. Well, I'm coming from that competition side,
Right.
and how we really protect our guns.
Yeah, and
But this
On the
this
waterfowl
gun.
side, we just beat them.
Well, then this was absolutely perfect. This was absolutely perfect conditions.
And what I think is interesting about the torture tour, right, is that probably over no one given season, someone truly tortures their gun to like purposely try to push the limits. But where I think this thing kind of resonates is if I'm a hunter where maybe I get to go away for one weekend a year, and this year I'm going to Alberta or I'm going to Salt Lake, and people talk about flying with 2 guns and having a backup, and what if something goes wrong with your gun? Like, so to know that this kind of testing has been done, and it's not done behind closed doors. This has been something that Beretta's put a ton of time and resource in to ensure that the message has been told, the stories are being told. All of this stuff is being done in the open to see, just how, the gun can function in real world scenarios. So I think it provides a lot of peace of mind for people that are looking to spend the kind of money that it takes to buy a gun like this, and knowing that they're going to get a quality product.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that we spend years on validation on the 400 series alone.
Yeah.
We've in Italy, this gun is made in Italy, we have spent so many years just trying to perfect it. And I think, we kind of hit the sweet spot with the original Xtreme.
Yeah.
Because it's an evolution of the older models, of course. Right. The rotating bolt guns, the old 391 Extrema, the 391 Extrema 2, and then the 400 Xtreme. That's kind of where we kind of got it basically almost all the way there. After that, it's tweaking everything to fit the right needs for the right shooter. You got to have everything fit properly and other things. But we spent, gee whiz, I think on that program alone, it was tens of thousands of shells on validation.
Yeah.
And that's just to ensure that one small component, the one pin, will hold up for the life of the gun.
Right.
And that's just one part of the system. They'll do the rest of the gun as well, individual component validation, so much. And that's kind of where we come from. We want to know that when you're buying a Beretta, that you're going to be able to shoot it for a lifetime. Yep. That you're going to be able to have that gun handed down to your kids.
Yep.
Semi-automatic, over-under, you name it. We want to be assured from a manufacturing perspective, from a company perspective, that it's good enough for the Beretta name.
Yep.
And that it's good enough to stand up to 500 years of that name.
Yeah.
Exactly. And a lot of times when I'm talking to, consumers or potential consumers, I'm like, the Beretta to me is a lifetime gun.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that's important in the waterfowl world because, every dad, dreams of being able to one day give that gun to their son, and maybe their first gun was given to them by their dad and
Absolutely.
things like that. So that's definitely important. And that kind of segues into a little bit of some of the things I want to talk about the gun because, we in the scenario we're talking about, and we've talked a lot about in our show, gun fit, adjustability, things like that being so important. Talk a little bit about some of the things that have been built into this gun to allow the hunter who wants to hand it down to their son. Maybe they bought this gun, and in 2 years from now, their son's going to go out for his first hunt, and he wants to use a Beretta A400 Xtreme Plus. Like, talk about some of the things that can be adjusted to fit that big scope, and then one day that kid will be able to pass it on to his son kind of deal.
I'm going to let Diane handle this one because she's worked with me and others incessantly on gun fit, and she is truly an expert on this one.
Well, if you just start with the stock of the gun,
Yep.
What do you have? You have a stock that's fully adjustable up to 14 inches.
Down to.
Yep. Not up to. Yeah. Down to. I'm pushing my hand in, as you notice. I'm pushing it in. So down to 14 inches.
We need caffeine. We established that before the show started.
Exactly. See, you can't see all my hand movements here on the podcast. But anyway, so down to 14 inches, which is a great advantage. So you know what? You're going to get women into this gun. You're going to get kids into this gun. And it's going to be able to grow with them, some of the kids, as they grow, it's going to be able to grow with them. You got the benefit of the recoil reducers built right into the stock and into the grip of the gun, which is just when you're shooting waterfowl loads, hunting type loads under higher pressure, obviously more recoil. Mm-hmm. This has just done a great job of knocking it down, making it that comfort, that you got that comfortability, and then on the comb of the stock, you just have that. What's that cover made of, Eric?
It's a rubber.
It's like
compound.
a rubber neoprene
like
type.
The soft comb where your cheek
soft comb
goes down on.
It's a hybrid. Closest akin to the Gel-Tech cheek protectors, but it's much more rugged. So they've taken that Gel-Tech that's a stick-on that we sell, and inserted it into the mold and ruggedized it. Now, that's not to say that you hit the wrong chemical on it, couldn't cause issues. But it's designed to be a very long-lasting material and hold up to a lot of conditions.
Right. It's a nice soft cheek pad there. So the comfortability alone with the stock and the adjustability. And, of course, like all the Beretta stocks on their auto, you can adjust them for, cast and up and down,
the drop.
So
drop and
the
cast,
drop and drop and cast. So that's a great benefit. Other things that they did to it, they just maybe took some ideas from the competition end, was the design of the barrel.
Yeah.
This is probably, I'm going to say it is.
It is,
the best waterfowl gun on the market. The barrel is the best. Yep.
Yeah, I know that the barrel is something that's got a lot of unique features built into it, and I'm glad you transitioned to this because it is truly a mix of the competition side coming to the waterfowl space. So go ahead and talk a little bit about some of those features, and I may ask you to clarify some of these things because I think a lot of times we hear terms and we see things put out there, but for someone who's been an archery deer hunter their whole career and they just get into waterfowl hunting, they may not know what a forcing cone is, or how does that play in concert with your choke tubes? And, why do I care about a raised rib? Like, what does that matter to me? All of those things that, people that are experienced probably take for granted. But for those that don't, I may ask you to clarify some of those things as we kind of go through this.
Eric and I were just talking about it, just a little while ago. We were talking about the little step rib that's on the barrel.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that Eric and I, admittedly, we're like flat rib shooters, and we're used to it.
I've never been a trap shooter because a trap shooter is going to have a raised rib, whether or not it's a step rib or a moneymaker, depending on who we're talking about.
Right.
A very high rib. Trap shooters almost always have some sort of higher rib than standard because you've got the clay moving away from you. It's rising. You got to be able to. They have a very defined, specific set of circumstances they're busting clays in. So they want a high rib that fit those needs, and that's totally fine. But Diane and I, we shoot.
Yeah, in the sporting end of it, you will see a lot of flat rib guns, but you'll see some variation, some high, mid, but you'll see mostly flat. And having this little bit of step rib on this barrel, it makes it easier to go to your target, the duck, the goose. You're wearing a jacket.
Yeah.
You're wearing something bulky.
And we have the soft comb that raises your cheek up even more because it's a higher comb than the original Xtreme. So
that rib is coming to your eye a lot quicker.
Yeah. And I have to say, my typical gun, and we talked about this before, I typically hunt with an A400. It's what I've hunted with like the last 4 or 5 years, and it's it's flat like that. And I do struggle from September when it's hot and I'm hunting in a t-shirt to January when I've got layers on. Getting my cheek down and getting that good sight picture is a struggle. And when we went to Maryland for the hunt, I was a little bit concerned because, I'm a taller guy. I got long arms. I got a long length of pull. Like I was like, how's this going to get a fit? Because I know the hunters are a variety of shapes and sizes and men and female and women, all that stuff. Like, so I was just like, how's the gun going to work for me? And I grabbed the thing and I put it to my shoulder and I was like, it's going to work just fine. It was like, it just fit.
Right.
Like it was made for me.
They thought of everything pretty much with this gun.
Yeah, I mean, we include spacers with the gun, not only so it comes with a spacer installed, right? So as Diane mentioned earlier, you can pull that spacer out and get a ½ inch at a length of pull. You can get down to 14 inches with a flat plate, or not plate, it's a flat pad on the back.
Yeah.
Or let's say, you're got gorilla arms and you're tall.
Yep.
That would be
mostly
you, Josh.
Right.
Well, we can get your length to pull out to, if you really wanted to, we get it out over 16 inches.
Yeah.
We're talking probably some special screws at that point for the pad, but we've got spacers. It comes with spacers to get out to 15 and I want to say 15 and a half with the existing pad that comes on the gun, because you got a 1 inch, a ½ inch, and then you got the pad. And so that comes in a box.
Yep.
And you can stack the spacers. So length of pull alone, you got 14 all the way out to over 15.
Right.
And then you've got 2 sets of drop spacers that come with it. So you can go anywhere from a 50 mil drop to a 65 mil drop just by how you set it up. And if you need further adjustment, if you want to raise it up, we do have other spacers available, the trap ones. If somebody wants to shoot it like a rifle for whatever reason.
Right.
But it's definitely something that we have just designed into the gun. We have a high level of interchangeability and adjustability for the gun. You pair that with a step rib. Really, I think that there's no shooter we couldn't find a fit of some sort
Exactly.
for.
Yeah. And And I wanted to just ask you to expound a little bit more on the other technologies on the interior of the barrel. And we talked a little bit about this also before we started recording, but there truly is some more of that competition mentality that has been crossed over into this platform to really improve the shootability and the patterning capabilities of the gun and things like that. So talk a little bit about sort of how that thought process sort of infused and has made its way now into the waterfowl line.
So, better looking on the competition end of things, the barrels are quite good. At Beretta, the barrel that is currently on this Xtreme Plus is what we call Stelium Plus barrel. Okay, so what that means is it talks about what is the length of the forcing cones, the taper in the barrel. So this one, I would say, tapers out. What did we say, about 30 millimeters down the barrel? 30 millimeters down the barrel, about halfway.
It's about halfway down. It's about. It's actually, I think it's more than 30.
It's like 14 inches.
It's like 14
inches.
inches.
It's like kind of right at the end of the magazine cap. There is sort of where it runs
I can't in my head right now without any caffeine. I can't do the conversion metric to inches.
Well, I know from the base of the choke tube to the beginning of the barrel, it's about halfway in between those 2 points. If you can visualize that.
Yeah.
So, and what that does is that the tapers in the barrel control your shot pattern. Okay?
Yep.
So in a competition end of it, that's real important to us.
Sure.
All right? But we're shooting lead shells. You're shooting waterfowl, you're going to be shooting a lot of steel, obviously.
Uh-huh.
So there's a little bit of difference there. Actually, this Stelium Plus barrel with the steel shot is probably going to even be more effective because you're not getting that. What's happening is that hunting load is at a higher compression as it's leaving the gun.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So the goal of this barrel and the length of the forcing cones is to maintain your shot and not distort it as much as possible before it leaves the barrel.
Yeah, very gradual constriction as
Very
compared
gradual.
to a traditional forcing cone is less than 3 inches, right? If we're talking old school mobile choke like your A300, it's essentially a 3-inch forcing cone. So it's when you've got that steel shot column coming up and hitting that forcing cone, it's going from bore diameter, which is 732 on an A300, down to, let's say sub bore. I think at the beginning of the forcing cone, you're getting down to 729, and it's constricting, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very, very gradual with the Stelium Plus and a longer forcing cone, and this is especially important with steel. I mean, lead, we see what that does in competition, but with steel, if you're running a constriction that's either too sharp or too tight, you run the risk of having your shot column and your shot pattern distorted in some way because it's too abrupt, and steel just doesn't deform the way lead does.
Yeah.
So
the goal is when that shot leaves the barrel, you want a slower spread in your pattern.
Yeah.
Okay.
Holes.
Right. It keeping, like, if you say like your shot pattern had flyers in it, let's just say, it's hopefully keeping those flyers in more control and your pattern is more consistent. Okay. Giving you more energy downrange, and that's where you want it. You want that energy to be able to make an ethical kill on a duck or a goose.
Yep.
Or in the competition side, you want to be able to break that target out at, 50, 60 yards. You want that hard hit.
Yeah.
Which with older style of barrel design, I mean, you're going to have to go with a tighter and tighter and tighter choke to be able to make that hit at that range.
Right.
And with this gun, the way that forcing cone acts is I'm going to call it like a pre-choke choke.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes... It's a pre-choke choke, essentially.
That's probably a good way to look at it, yeah.
The way that it's a gradual constriction and the way that it works on the shot column and just it doesn't offer as abrupt of a constriction. Not only does it offer a much, much more consistent pattern without those flyers, without those holes, and without the deformation that you would see with a more abrupt forcing cone, but it also reduces the recoil. Right?
Yeah.
It's because you don't have that abrupt, I've got this bore diameter shoving into a tiny little constriction, right? Not tiny, but an abrupt constriction.
Right.
It's able to slow down the impulse of that recoil.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't eliminate the recoil, but it's the same principle as with the kickoff. No. You still have the same amount of recoil. But the way that the physics are with it, it's dispersed over a longer period of time because it takes place over a longer period of time.
Right.
And therefore, you don't notice it as much, and your body is able to compensate for it better. So, I mean, we'll take the competition world. You put a kickoff in a 13. Well, I'm talking 3-gun competition. You put a kickoff into a 1301. You run it right. You can ride that recoil and get right back on target. Your split times are cut in half. Right. And if you translate that to a waterfowl load, well, let's say you got a bunch of snows coming, and you can get right on target so much faster by doing that, and you're not beating yourself up so much, because even though it's the same amount of recoil, because it's transmitted over a longer period of time, it's not like an abrupt punch, it's just like a shove.
Yeah.
And we all know getting shoved is a lot easier than getting punched.
Right. Yeah, and how does it evolve? Because, the forcing cone thing, as we talked about, is like sort of the pre-choke concept. How does that all factor into the choke selection that a hunter might want to make now that they're shooting a gun that maybe they've used to in the past, shooting a gun that's got a 3-inch, forcing cone, and now a significantly longer? So there's a lot more going on that maybe they don't realize. And how, in your opinion, would that impact their choke selection? Because, for me, my entire waterfowl life, I've shot a full choke, but I've shot primarily 2-inch steel. Now I'm shooting, bismuth load primarily, and I'm still shooting that choke down pretty tight out of the same gun. But
now we're getting into the real contentious part of the podcast.
We are.
It's not contentious.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to let...
I just think that Josh...
start from the competition side.
Well, yeah, I'm just thinking from the competition side. We probably have less confusion about choke constriction. I see more confusion when it comes to shooting steel loads.
Yeah.
There's some real confusion there on what's best to use. On the competition side, it's just, people, we're shooting hundreds, thousands of rounds.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not unusual for you to shoot 2-3 flats at least during a day of heavy competition.
Well, yeah, over the course of a few days, you'll probably shoot 2 or 3 flats, or if you're practicing, you probably you might shoot 2 flats in one day. So you're shooting hundreds of rounds. You know your gun pretty well. You know your chokes pretty well, and feel confident in the pattern. When it comes to hunting, and where we're not firing that many rounds, or we're probably not even practicing a whole lot with that gun, and the steel component adds a little bit of confusion. And I know we were just talking about, you were saying like you use full choke.
Yep.
Well, I know Beretta really doesn't recommend full choke in the gun with the steel. They don't recommend anything over modified.
Yeah.
And Eric, I'm going to let Eric expound on that and why.
So there's a multitude of factors that go into why we don't recommend shooting anything tighter than a mod with steel or bismuth or tungsten, you name it, in a Beretta choke, Beretta barrel. It's not anything to do with necessarily damage that could happen. It's more that even with the traditional forcing cone, it's actually less of an issue with the modern forcing cone, the Stelium Plus forcing cone. But you run the risk of, well, we'll step back a little bit. Lead deforms differently when it's choked down, right? So it's a very consistent deformation. It doesn't tend to cause any problems with the shot column, the shot pattern. It doesn't deform as badly as the non-lead shot. The non-lead shot is getting better these days. Steel, of course, is kind of the old standby, and it has issues when it comes to deformation. It's a harder material than lead by far. So it doesn't deform down properly as compared to, I'm not going to say properly, in the same way as lead.
Yeah.
And so from a factory perspective, we can't verify with every load, because we may release a gun and then 10 years later there's some new whiz-bang load on the market that wasn't in existence when we started building the gun. So we can verify with just about every load on the market up to a certain constriction. And for us, that's generally modified.
Yeah.
And we can guarantee from a factory perspective, from that tens of thousands of shells of validation, that we know generally how the gun's going to work and how it's going to perform no matter what the load is and no matter what the distance is. When you go with a different constriction, different material, different variable that gets jumped in there, we can't confirm that, especially if there's some new material, some new style of load. Federal came out with their flight control wad, for instance, that changed the game for cylinder guns, fixed cylinder guns. And it's just, we want to be very, very confident in the product we're putting to market. So that's why we generally don't recommend anything tighter than a modified with a non-lead shot. Now, that being said, there's always a caveat in there, especially with the new Stelium Plus forcing cone on the Xtreme Plus. Because it's a gradual constriction versus a very abrupt constriction, we know that it's going to perform a little better. We're still going to, from a factory perspective, never recommend tighter than modified. But there's always variability. And that gradual forcing cone does allow, in the aftermarket, for folks to play around with their constrictions. As with anything, especially when it comes to hunting, I would not recommend using anything tighter than modified with any non-lead shot, unless you ensure, A, that you go out and pattern it enough so you know exactly that what your pattern looks like.
Yeah.
And you know exactly that there's no flyers, and you're going to get, as Diane mentioned, a clean, ethical shot on whatever you're hunting.
Right.
Because in the end, that's really, you don't want an unethical shot.
Right.
Yep.
And if you don't know where all those pellets are going, you can't guarantee that.
Yeah.
Right.
So you've got to go pattern it always. So I can't emphasize that enough. Pattern it with whatever you're going to do.
Yeah.
Period.
Yep.
Even if you're sticking with modified, pattern it so you know where it's going. But let's say you want to try and experiment with tighter stuff. I'm not going to tell you not to, but I am going to tell you that we don't guarantee it.
Right.
We guarantee it with modified. Tighter than that, your mileage may vary.
Sure.
Go pattern it. Go see how it behaves for you. And keep in mind that when you go too tight with a non-lead load, even if it's mild steel shot, you run the risk of causing damage to your barrel if something goes, what is a series of unfortunate events all come together and cause something to happen.
Yeah.
Because we're running with non-lead, we're running with shot it's harder than lead, and it behaves differently. So if your choke isn't screwed in all the way, for instance, you can get a stuck wad, or you can get a piece of a shot underneath, in a choke seat between the walls. There's all sorts of things that happen. With lead, it could cause a problem, but it's far less likely to, because it's not nearly as strong a metal hard as a metal,
Right,
in terms of the shot. So anything tighter than modified from a factory perspective, your mileage may vary. We don't guarantee it, but it's your gun. I'm not going to tell you not to do what you want to do with it, but just
be cautious.
Be cautious and pattern it. Pattern it.
Yeah.
I can't say that enough.
Yeah. So the takeaway here is to pattern it. Got
Yes.
it. Probably write that down.
Yes.
I think it's a good point. And it's definitely one of those things where, within some of our forum discussions and stuff, you get people that are, hard line on one and hard line on the other. And I think to your point, though, not everybody, everyone's situation is a little bit different. And,
Absolutely.
There's no one perfect way to do it. It's whatever's going to give you the confidence to go out there and make a clean, ethical kill, whether you're in the duck blind, on the competition, range, whatever it is. Being confident in your gun is kind of what it's all about, and being comfortable that you can execute the shot that you're about to take.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's all about being ethical in the end, and making sure that the gun's going to work every time, that you know where every pellet is going to go, and that you know that you can make that kill at that distance.
With that barrel, the improvement to that barrel with the Stelium Plus and that modified choke, I am very confident there's not much it won't reach out and touch.
Yeah. We that was definitely one thing that we were testing in our torture tour stop, because the birds seemed to know where that 40-yard mark was, and we had to stretch it out a couple times, and and it was. Honestly, that was one of my biggest concerns. Like I said, it's like, okay, we're going to Maryland. We're going to hunt with Beretta. We got, all these guys, cameras everywhere, all this stuff going on. What are they going to do when I take it to the plug? And it's just, I whiff 3 times, and it's like, I was a little bit nervous about that. But then I shouldered the gun. I'm like, you know what? This gun kind of feels like it was made for me. And then, it's just hunting at that point. And it was a great experience. So, guys, I appreciate you guys making some time for us here today. I know it's a busy day, and we've got, the conclusion of the torture tour here this afternoon that we're going to go celebrate. So I'm looking forward to that. And again, I just appreciate you guys spending time with us, and we appreciate Beretta including us in the torture tour and the opportunity to test the guns and get the message out as well.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Josh. Our pleasure.
I got to tell you, I appreciate the opportunity to rest my dogs.
Yeah. We got to get off our feet for a little bit, so that's all good. But unfortunately, I'm gonna have to cut you guys loose and put you back to work. So I don't want to get anybody in trouble over here. So again, we appreciate your time, and we're looking forward to this afternoon and getting everything wrapped up.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks again.
All right. Well, again, thank you to Eric and Diane for giving me some of their time. I mean, I can't understate how busy their schedules are at these kinds of events. They're always going between meetings and product demos and meeting with different folks and just being available for people to ask questions and stuff. So I am very, very thankful and grateful for them allowing me the time that they did to sit down with me. So definitely appreciate them. Hopefully it addressed any questions that you may have about the A400 Xtreme Plus. Maybe it got you thinking a little bit about your gun and your setup and kind of what you might look for if you're looking to upgrade, or if you're looking for something to do to your firearm as far as aftermarket customizations, things like that can be done that may be inspired by this particular firearm. So hopefully enjoyed that. I certainly did. And appreciate those guys giving me the time. That's pretty much what we got for you this week. Next week, Dan will be back in the saddle with me, as he always is, and we'll be back to sort of our regularly scheduled programming, for lack of a better way to describe it. But hopefully enjoyed our getting out in the field. It's always fun for us to get out and do stuff in person and actually get into the environment. And it just always seems to foster great conversation and really valuable stuff. So I think without further ado, we'll go ahead and wrap up this week's episode. But before we do, again, just want to remind you that Cornerstone Gun Dog Academy is the world's most comprehensive online gun dog training resource. They've got over 160 instructional videos, including everything that you need to take a 7-week-old puppy to a finished gun dog. Visit cornerstonegundogacademy.com, sign up for their free preview module, and begin your training journey today. Cornerstone Gun Dog Academy, the world's most advanced gun dog training resource on the web. Also, thank you to Gunner Kennels, Eukanuba, and Big Kansas Outdoors for their support of the show. And also encourage you to head over to the HP Outdoors website discount page and take advantage of any discounts that we have available for you over there. All right, that's going to do it for episode 132. Hopefully you enjoyed our chat out at the NRA annual meetings and at the conclusion of the Torture Tour. If you're new to the show, head over to iTunes. You can get caught up on all the past episodes over there. And while you're there, we'd love for you to leave a 5-star rating and review. That helps like-minded hunters just like you find our program. We'll be back with you next week. I'll have Dan back in the saddle with me, and we'll be bringing you another great episode with great content. That'll do it for this week. For Dan, I'm Josh. Take care.